Thank you for yielding back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Kim for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, again, thank you for joining with us here today. I wanted to just go back to something you said a couple times earlier in this hearing, which is about, you said a line that said, on the things we can agree on, let's move forward. And I think that that's a great sentiment here. And I wanted to just focus in on a couple issues here. So going back to housing, you just talked about it a couple times. You said that you agree that it's important to support Americans with housing. You made reference to an announcement that'll come later on today about moratorium. First of all, just to be clear, you agree that a moratorium is not enough. Is that correct?
My first choice as it relates to rentals is rental assistance, not a moratorium. And as it relates to mortgages, I think, as you know, a substantial portion of the market is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and I think they've created a very successful program in forbearance, which I support.
So when we're looking at this question now, if we have agreement that we need to have some support here for renters and for others, for keep a roof over our head, now the question is how much and how we can provide that type of support. And here I want to just drill down a little bit. When the Aspen Institute recognizes that we have perhaps the largest housing crisis in our country's history, they're saying 30 to 40 million Americans may very well be at risk of eviction in the next couple months. That then we take into account in terms of calculating what support we can provide here. When I see the Senate Republicans HEALS Act put in $3.3 billion, as opposed to what in the HEROES Act was about $100 billion. You said $100 billion was too much in your opinion. But if you look at the $3.3 billion, let's say we use the conservative element of 30 million Americans, at the conservative side what the Aspen Institute estimates. 30 million Americans, $3.3 billion, that's about $110 a person. So I just kind of want to ask you, what is the right level? Do you think $110 a person is the correct amount to be able to help with rental assistance?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for being here in person. I think the 30 to 40 million people is just absurdly high. I mean, there's only 40 million rental units. And I would also add, depending upon what we do with enhanced unemployment, has a relationship to what you need to spend on rental assistance. If you're giving people enhanced unemployment who are out of work, they can use some of that money to pay their rent. So these things are all interrelated. But no, I think the 30 to 40 million is grossly high in terms of estimates, and I think this is nothing close to what was the mortgage and housing crisis that we had during the recession.
Let me just switch gears here to health care. So just a quick question. Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea to have millions of Americans lose health care during the middle of a pandemic?
I don't think it's a good idea. That's one of the reasons why I support the PPP and other things that keep workers attached to their business so they can continue to get health care. And I think, as you know, as part of the first bill that we passed with the House and the Senate, we allowed small businesses to maintain money for health care.
But despite those changes, despite those efforts that we've had, there's been an estimate of about 5.4 million American workers stripped of their health insurance between February and May, and we expect many more. And that's on top of the 30 million Americans in our country that did not have health care to start with before this pandemic. So one of the big efforts that we tried to do when it comes to the HEROES Act was to try to provide federal financing for Americans to be able to keep insurance through January 31st, 2021. Also to be able to have a special enrollment period for coverage through the ACA. Those are some of the efforts we're trying to do, but when it comes to the Republican Senate bill, none of that is in there. So, look, when you agree that we don't want to have Americans losing their health care during the middle of a pandemic, why is that provision, why aren't those provisions ones that you would agree upon?
I'm not familiar with those specific provisions. We'd be happy to follow up with you. Again, I think our first choice is getting people back to work where they have health care, but if there's areas as you've described, we'd be happy to look at that.
I would ask you to take a look at that. I'll have my office send it back over, but it's important here because, again, when we're talking from a level, and I'll go back to what you said about trying to find areas of agreement and move forward on that. I want us to make sure that we are looking at it through the eyes of people in my district and people all over this country. People in my district that have lost health care or are on the verge of losing their home, they don't have the luxury of just, coming up with some of the low-hanging fruit and then kick the can down the road. We have to step up and have some of these tough discussions with each other, try to make sure that we move forward on this. So I agree with you, let's start with the areas of agreement, but we cannot just keep kicking the can down the road, and that's what the American people are seeing over and over and over again. So again, I'm just grateful for you coming in today and having a chance to talk with you. I hope we can continue to work forward further. Mr. Chairman, just before I yield back here, I just have a unanimous consent request here. I seek unanimous consent to enter 2 documents into the record. The first is a Wall Street Journal article stating that major U.S. employers are considering significant new layoffs and making furloughs permanent as the coronavirus pandemic drags on. This includes American Airlines, Coca-Cola, Salesforce, United Airlines, MGM, and many others. According to this article, a recent survey, quote, found nearly half of U.S. employers that furloughed or laid off staff because of COVID-19 are considering additional workplace cuts in the next 12 months. The second document is a report from the Economic Policy Institute showing that the historic layoffs from the coronavirus have led to approximately 12 million people being cut off from employer-sponsored health care and health insurance in the middle of a public health crisis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.